Hello. Um, Welcome to my video. Um, on the talk sheet today is the subject of jobs or work, but I like to call it jobs because work can be something that you can enjoy, whereas most often these days jobs are pretty fraught, are a pretty difficult thing to live with. Um, This is the first in what I hope will be a series of videos where I casually discuss my thoughts on various subjects. So, this being my first foray into this, please bear with me if I get uh, inarticulate or repetitive, though I will be implementing editing, so that will hopefully help. Um, I chose the topic of jobs um, because, as my first topic, because it is something I have thought a lot about and that I've talked a lot about with other people. Um, and these days, my job circumstance is pretty unique, I'd say. I kind of straddle two different worlds with two part-time jobs, but I'll get to that. Um, but I think I have a unique position that will give me a semi-robust perspective to draw on. So hopefully I can um, provide some good insight. And yeah, my goal here is simply to offer my perspective and my thoughts about living life with job or jobs. Um, and I just hope it will maybe be interesting for whoever's watching, or maybe even helpful, or maybe I will speak to something new to you that will be interesting. But yeah, let's get right into it. I've got my trusty ginger lime mule polar seltzer, so I'm all ready if you are. So let's get into it. So I figured the best way to start with this is I will kind of give a quick chronological uh, from birth to present day through the lens of job. Um, and then sort of when make commentary throughout, and then at the end kind of give some summative thoughts. I am 28 years old. I was born in 1997. I grew up middle class amongst a mostly lower middle class, or mostly low middle or poor families. I live in mid coast Maine, rural ish, not quite way up north, the true rural, but in a place where I'm about 30 minutes from Portland. And so I live in an area where there are like farms around me, um, but not quite suburbia or anything like that, but rural ish. So growing up through up around through high school, I didn't have any jobs. I was I wasn't interested in one, in getting one, and I was sort of encouraged and allowed by my parents to just focus on being a student. Focus on being a student, on doing the sports I did. I did cross country and skiing and track, and doing whatever other extracurriculars. Um, and so, and that's not the case with everybody. I know a lot of people have jobs throughout high school, but I didn't want one, and no one really made me have one. And because I took school so seriously, um, and performed pretty well in that capacity, It seemed like that was okay with everyone. And, having a job, or what a life of job having, what that really looked like, I never gave it much thought. Um, in preparing for this video, I was trying to think, like, what was even my conception of what a job, or I guess a career, what was my conception of that? Because I can't, um, because I think if I had if I had known earlier on, perhaps I would have been more worried about it earlier, or maybe would have done something different. But I guess in thinking about it, I guess I assumed unconsciously that my whatever job I ended up having, or career, would just feel like having more school. Like, it would be just the the place you went, like the purpose you had, and your friends would be there, you would make friends there, that would be your social situation, and it would be kind of the purpose of your life, like school was for me. So in 2015, I graduated high school and I went to a nice liberal arts college in the state with some help from financial aid. Um, I won't say names just because I don't really want to, but there's three. There's three that it could be. So use your imagination. Um, and because I got some nice financial aid, currently I do have student loan debt, um, but certainly not as much as most people. I'm in a better position than most people in my situation. But in school, in college rather, this was my first my first real interaction with a job. So growing up, I'd done like babysitting or like odd jobs, like yard work and stuff like that. But I got my first like 5 to 10 hour a week position as a communications intern. Um, so this was like MailChimp, Google Sheets, looking at emails, looking at the school website, kind of learning some WordPress stuff. Um, and I had a good boss slash teacher mentor for me in this position these 4 years. And it was pretty interesting to me, the communications sphere. And ultimately, it was really important, looking back, that even just dipping my toe in that little bit of getting that kind of skill foundation was really important. However, this was also when I learned that I hated working. I realized, I could enjoy kind of being in my bubble, listening to a podcast or music or whatever. But man, it really dragged. And I think at that time, particularly, what really rubbing me wrong about it, was when I was around that age, 19 or 20 years old, um, when I conceived of what the most ideal post college situation would be. I was really, really into making music. I really loved recording and writing. I was doing kind of a singer-songwriter thing, not in a band, but recording music. Um, and in my head, I was like, well, if I want to be happy, it would seem that I would need a career making music, or in this creative sphere. And it was apparent to me, even as I thought about that was what I wanted, it was apparent to me that that would be a huge struggle. Um, you know, I was pretty good at making. I was making kind of like indie rock stuff, kind of similar. I still kind of make that genre now, and I've made some good songs, but I was not a startling talent. I'm not and not a glimmering uh, voice. And I had no connections. That I had not gone to a school that was building me business connections. I was not from a family that had any history with recording music or being in bands or any. I had no connections, so it was as even much more apparent as it is to me now. It was pretty apparent to me then that if that's what I wanted, it would the odds were slim of making a career out of making music. And so this is where a pretty deep depression sort of gripped me around, I'd say, senior year of college, because I could not imagine a future where I was going to be happy. Because at that time, and this is due to, and I say this sympathetically, this was due to a lack of imagination on my part. Uh, because at that time, just my conception of all this was, you know, you went to school, you found a career that you were passionate about, and that's what would make you happy for your life, right? That the college opened this door for you to a career, and the career would make you happy. And my family is full of mostly careerists as well, people who found um, a lane and stayed in that lane. Um, but even just based on the small amounts of office work that I'd been exposed to, where even 5, 10, 15 hours a week was would put me in situations of being pretty uh, restless, um, being being trapped into something for 40 hours a week uh, was was really difficult to comprehend. And of course, this was only one sliver of what was fueling my depression at that time. But I will say a broad stroke that is pretty accurate that this really fed into is that I couldn't picture my future. I couldn't picture it because I had this one view where it was like career is job career is it. It fills your life and it is your life. Um, so I was really depressed. But so the summer after I graduated in 2019, I graduated with a major in English. If you're curious, it's an awesome decision. That's not sarcastic. I really loved my education, and I wouldn't do anything about different. But I had this really positive epiphany in the summer right after, where I worked part time on a small vegetable farm in a town near me. And this is where I learned that I really liked manual, tactile, task based, team based labor. Now, this is something that I had not learned about in school at all. It is perhaps there was some avenue during college that would have showed me this about myself. Um, but if there was, I didn't access it. But this was very enlightening to me because suddenly here was work that was, tiring, could be rote, but felt felt, like something I could enjoy doing. It was fulfilling to feel you know, to start the day, see all the crops laid out on the row, and it says, all right, we got to pick this many uh, turnips and beets and cut this many heads of lettuce, peppers, whatever, and you got to bring them from point A to point B. Pick them, wash them, get, and then do other whatever busy work for the next day. It just was like, it made sense because it's like these are things that have to be done. Um, Task based. That's what I'd really like to lean on for the appeal of that work. Because, and there was, it was the concept as well that you, there was an amount of work, and so theoretically it could be finished. Typically, it's not like, it wasn't like at the end of the day, there, it's like, well, there's nothing left. I mean, sometimes that would happen, very rarely. But even just the kind of theoretically, where you have in your head, it's like, well, if we were to have finished this really quickly, we would be allowed to go home because it's done. And there is something so mentally relieving about that as opposed to time based labor, right? Which is where you are locked into a place from this point to this point. Because then it's like, okay, there's nothing my will can exert to change these circumstances, even if these circumstances get extremely stupid and boring. Um, I am I am submissive to them, if that makes sense. So working at that farm was a really awesome experience, and taught me that about myself, about the sort of work that I respond positively to. So then, in the fall of that year, because while I was working at the vegetable farm, I had just been living with my parents and working there. I moved out and I moved to Portland, and I got a full time job working as a barista in the Whole Foods there. Um, and I was a barista and I worked at the juice bar. Um, and I liked that too, And I liked being a barista. It was fast paced. Um, Baristas, this is a pretty good rule of thumb. If you're a young person with some kind of artistic sensibility, um, and someone who is generally not in love with going to work, you could do worse than get a job at your local coffee shop, because there's probably going to be at least one or two baristas there that you can probably chill with. So yeah, I was living in Portland with three other guys that I knew from high school, some of my closest friends from high school. So I had reconnected with them, was living with them. I was working this job and meeting new people in Portland. And, I was still struggling with mental health things, some of which were related to work. Some of them were just, I think, of the times of being 22 years old or however old I was. But it was working out, It was a right after school type job, and it was good to have gotten that customer service experience, and I met cool people. So, if you are paying attention to the timeline, that was in fall of 2019, so you know what is coming, which is that in March of 2020 is when emergency lockdown happened in Portland or in Maine. I forget. Um, but it happened, and I was working at Whole Foods. So, like, I remember people running around buying toilet paper. I remember it pretty well, and that's a different video. Um, but that eventually became quickly pretty unbearable because I won't beat a dead horse here, but I became an essential worker, which the only real perks that came with that was being called an essential worker. I think maybe there was a slight raise, which that was nice. Um, for context, though, this is how much the world has changed. In 2019, when I got that job as a barista, starting wage was $15 an hour, no tip, no tips. We couldn't accept tips, but that was considered like highly competitive in Portland. That was like, oh, entry level position at $15 an hour, like hell yeah. Which is just absurd to think about now. But essentially, what happened was I was kind of then pushed into doing Prime shopping, which, if you don't know, Amazon owns Whole Foods. And they had very coincidentally been introducing Prime shopping to Whole Foods in the year leading up to COVID. So we were all primed to do Prime, a lot more Prime shopping once COVID hit. And I did that for a while, and then it was about all I could bear. So I quit that, and that summer of 2020, I work a few more jobs that just did not were not good for me. I pivoted to working at the local food co-op, which I just shouldn't have um, gone back into like a grocery store. Like it was just it had its relatively pros and cons, but I just shouldn't have been putting myself back in that place. It was really getting to be hell uh, on my nerves. And again, at this age, I was a twitchy, anxious, uh, unhappy sort of individual. I just shouldn't have been there. And then I made an even worse decision where I worked at a call center, which again, I just don't even know what I was thinking in applying to that. So eventually, by fall of 2020, I just decided, I looked at my bank account. I and the this will rock your socks too. At that time, I was paying $400 for rent. Now it was a bit of a squalorly apartment that was made for three people with four people living in it. So we were splitting rent four ways, but still, but still. So I looked at my bank account and I was like, well, I think I have enough saved that I can just stop working for a little bit. And remember, because I was not laid off, I did not receive any unemployment during COVID, of which I'm still salty about today. But I'm really happy though for people who truly I am very happy for people who got some of that good unemployment, because a lot of people I know is the most money they'd ever seen in their life. So that's good. So I just decided I'm gonna see how long I can not work um, until I can, just give myself some time to figure out what's next. And so, in retrospect, I'm very glad that I did this. It was a good decision for me, and I'm really pleased with how I used. It ended up being about 5 months, and I used my time really well. I built a reading habit that is still with me today. I made myself, read a certain amount every day. I don't do it by amount, but I do read every day still. And I experimented with. I made it a practice to write essays and fiction to varying degrees of success. And at that time, I was able to pursue a fruitful opportunity with my music to try something new, which was record an album with my roommates. And that was really fun, a really fun learning experience. And so it's to say that I stopped working and I still tried to, apply some structure and value to my days, and I think it really paid off. Um, but eventually, the bank account got low enough where I was like, okay, well, I gotta stick my head back out and see where things are at. And so in about March of 2021, I found a really good job for myself. This job I would hold for the next 2.5 years, which is I worked in a coffee roastery in Portland, working about 3 to 4 days a week. Um, I say 3 to 4 because different periods of time during that stretch, I was working different amounts based on my own circumstances. And I really liked it, um, because it once again tapped into all these things I had mentioned before about what I liked about farming. I was working with a small team. It was task based, where it was like, all right, we entered the warehouse. Here's all the orders. This is what we've got to produce and ship out. Um, let's get to it. So it was very tactile, A to B, and very there were various different positions to hold. I won't get into this too much. This might be even another video. But where I was as the blender, it was very physically and mentally stimulating. So I enjoyed it quite a bit, and met a lot of really cool people there. However, it was, as I've said, as demanding as it was, as stimulating as that could be. Um, Physical and mental burnout was rampant in this place. Um, it was so draining, and the wages we were being paid were not were not inspiring, and you know, with no promises of getting a raise. Um, and I wasn't, and what I wasn't even full time, and I would I would end up with, at the end of the week, I would just be exhausted, and I couldn't. I just was seeing people working around me working all 5 days and this and that, and it's just like, I just can't believe I just couldn't believe it. There's lifting, you're doing math, you have to keep things organized. It was just brutal to see. Um, so an extremely challenging physical job with managers that were bastardly, in a lot of ways, I'll say. And this will segue us into our next point, all paid higher than us. We were a basically self-sufficient team of employees, um, but we were being paid lower than the bureaucratic, administrative, managing roles. So, uh, around this time, I'd say, again, I was there 2.5 years. It was kind of in that latter half. I was starting to look around job wise because, especially these days, you don't really enter, it's less and less likely that you enter a job kind of expecting to be there a long time. So I was looking around, and I developed a sort of a job paradigm in my head. And this is what I'm about to describe isn't going to be surprising, I think, to anyone. But it's a sort of an organizational system. In the broadest of terms, I think jobs fall into one of two categories. It is either an on your feet job or a computer job. And you can call these many different things. Either this could be the difference of blue collar or white collar, college or no college. you get the idea. And so to apply this to myself, in school, in my part-time position, I had gotten experience with computer job. That was computer job. But since graduating, I had not had a computer job. I'd only had on my feet jobs. And here's a point, too, that I really want to make that is important to me. So, the boys I was living with, as I said, they were all really close friends of mine. They were growing up. They were when I was living with them. They are now. None of them decided to go to college. They graduated high school and, you know, entered the workforce in service, kitchen, back of house, cashier, on your feet jobs. And here's the thing, all of them are extremely intelligent, capable people. And if you live in the real world, I mean, how many of us do these days? But if on these days when you're able to step into a bit of the real world, you might meet actually many of these people who did not pursue higher education and are extremely intelligent people. Some of actually the smartest people you've ever met. And then you start asking yourself, these people seem more capable with it and eager to learn than a lot of the people I went to my nice liberal arts school were. But that's maybe also another different video. But this is to say, thinking about this, the discrepancy between me and them became very clear. My degree had granted me the upward mobility to access the world of higher paid computer jobs. That really is what a college degree promises you. That is the role of college now more than ever, which is it opens a door to white-collar, high-paying, low-effort jobs. And again, I'm speaking super broadly here. I'm sure there are exceptions to this. But this is the way it lies to me, writ large. Because here's the fact. These computer jobs, they do not require more skill or knowledge than other jobs, than being a U.S. mail carrier, than being a pipe fitter. They're not more difficult. In fact, they're much easier. And as much as I really I recognize this, and as much I really resented that was the case, I wanted my piece of the pie. I said, I'm sick of this on my feet grind. I have my golden ticket. I have this degree. I want a piece of this easier white collar job life. So now in our chronology, I'm going to fast forward a bit to present day. My job situation now, since about 2023. In 2023, I exited that coffee roastery and I entered the situation that I'm in now, which is I have two part-time jobs. One, I'm in service, and the other, I have a virtual position in music publishing. And I have found this to be a really sustainable setup for me where I don't get too burnt out on either thing. I don't get, because there was a short period of time where I did just have this virtual position, and it was not for me. Sort of the concerns that I had, arose. It felt antisocial to work virtually, after working with teams and stuff so much. It felt really antisocial uh, to be cooped up. Even going out and working in a library or whatever. That's not really that doesn't really address the issue. And and sitting all day, just sitting. Um, it was not uh, it was not what I wanted. But that then balanced with this really nice service job I have, I got the best of both worlds. Not too much of either to get me sick and burnt of either one, but each one kind of is the refresher for the other. I have days where then I get sick of sitting in front of this here computer. I know the next day or whatever I'll be on my feet running around working with my coworkers. And I'm in a really fortunate position where both these places of employment um, really fulfill me, like in a really actual, authentic, deep way. Um, in a way that I kind of thought would never be possible. Um, so for that, I feel really fortunate. But now that we've kind of reached my present day in this capacity, now's where I kind of want to. I've taken a few tangents to speak summarily in this, but now I'm gonna do that a little more, and then we'll wrap things up. Um, what I've learned is that your career, or really your string of jobs, will not make you happy. Now, a lot of people watching this might be saying, well, of course, I already knew that. But that is something no one really told me growing up. I'd see, I would watch Fight Club, right? And those scenes with Edward Norton in the office. I would see images of dissatisfaction in jobs that were stupid. I saw. I think it was called Office Space is the famous one, or Office Work or whatever. But I just thought, I was like, well, that won't happen to me. I was like, surely whatever I get into is not that. Um, but the fact is, um, I'm completely disillusioned from the idea that um, the fulfillment in my life will be solely attained through an experience of career, right? So I stand by that right now. I am experiencing good fulfillment from these jobs, but that's something I did not, frankly, foresee for myself, and that I have to acknowledge is not really par for the course these days. Um, so it was pretty early on in my 20s that I had to learn how to wrap my mind around the fact, okay, whatever you're doing as a job, this will not give you purpose or make you happy. Hell with to hell with purposeful work. I'm sorry, my school did a great job preparing me in certain aspects. Um, but I purposeful work can only exist sometimes, and it mostly does not anymore. And certainly not in administrative, managerial, computer based jobs, unless, you know, computers are really what you're into. You really like these digging into computer stuff, and that's what gets your brain going. That's great. But I mean, if you're using a computer for emails, that kind of computer job, I really doubt that it is feeding your soul, and I don't think it ever will. Um, I I hate jobs, and I think we should all be trying to clock in as little as possible. I say this completely acknowledging that Um, for most people, this is not an option. They they need to work 40 hours. They need to work 60 hours, um, just to even start thinking about having a livable income. And for those people, obviously, I mean, therein lies the problem, right? But for any of us who may be able to feasibly move our lifestyles around, reorganize, think about what our priorities are, how we can really get by, I would really encourage to work as little as possible. And I would like to completely disavow all cultures of overworking. Um, and we're all pretty familiar with, say, grind culture. Of course, that falls into this, but I'm not even like the tech, the Wall Street tech. They're living on a different planet, right? Like this goes without saying. I do not align myself with those people, but their brains are different, and maybe that does make them happy. Um, I would argue that I would agree that I think they think it makes them happy, but I think there's probably something missing from their souls. And I don't say that to be mean, but just because I think it might be true. But as far as like overworking, the culture of overworking in a more common, less because those guys. This is like the sensationalized, like hyper version, but there are a couple of I think more common examples of overwork culture that I see a lot, especially in the world of service. Restaurant, bartending, this world. And it often comes in a what I call a combo that is the cry of help disguised as a humble brag, if this makes sense. And I don't really think in these instances this is people when people say these things or do these things they have this conscious awareness. Um, I don't think this is like a tactic or like a trait that they're walking out intentionally, but I think it's symptomatic of sort of the culture that we live in and what is rewarded and what is expected. This could also I've said cry for help. I've said humble brag. I would also throw in that this is a type of maybe even virtue signaling. These are all very charged terms, and I'd like to say I'm trying to express this as non-judgmentally as possible because in job world we all deserve sympathy because working sucks and a lot of times brings out the worst in us. Um, but I've given that long preface, but things where you see people kind of speaking in a cavalier or almost slightly uh, bragging type way about working overtime, about not sleeping, about not eating. Oh, I guess, I guess I'm just working another 45-hour week. Oh, I'm just realizing I didn't even eat this morning. We all know people who will casually say things like this, and again, they don't mean nothing by it. But next time, I would like to say next time maybe you hear someone you care about saying something like this, they say, "Oh, I haven't eaten today." Maybe say something along the lines of, "Well, you should eat tomorrow," or "Eat now," or with sleep, it's like, "Well, what would help you? Go to sleep." And I think you'll find if you actually push back gently in this way, you'll sense it in yourself, and I think maybe the other person may sense it too. Uh, just to disrupt the chain of glamorizing suffering. Really, there is no glamour in suffering, at all. And maybe what these people want is a type of sympathy that falls into cry for help. I don't know what it is, but just to very gently kind of push back on what you see as this kind of maybe a normalized hardship. Um, so I'm gonna wrap up here. I think I'm starting to get a little. My words are and thoughts are starting to get a little twisted and tangled. So I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead here. So instead of valorizing your job related suffering, just complain about it. And complaining can be annoying. But when people say can't complain, I always say yes you can, because things are tough. And usually it's the people who are saying can't complain who have the most right to complain. Um, so just express yourself. Express if there is something you need help with, just say you need help, or that you need help taking it easy. Don't feed into a culture of grinding yourself down. This thing that it's aestheticized. Take care of yourself. Um, there, I did it again. I got a little sidetracked. So let's wrap it up. If you can not work, then don't work, and don't feel bad about it. And also, if you have coworkers who take time off for vacation, they get sick, don't resent them. Even if it makes your life a little more difficult that day at your shift or whatever, be happy for them. Because then one day you'll maybe call out sick, and maybe you won't even really be sick. But then you'll think, I was happy for that person when they didn't have to work, so they'll be happy for me. And that way you all have each other's backs. Um, and listen, I know the job market right now is depressing and abysmal. It's bad. So none of these sort of positive tricks or insights or whatever, I could see how none of this could feel very actionable or really helpful. And again, I know it probably doesn't help to you, the viewer, to hear me say that I feel so lucky and fortunate um, about the job setup I have right now that is sustainable for me and my lifestyle. I would forgive you for being resentful of hearing that. But, you know, all I can say is, though, if you are deeply unsatisfied with the role jobs have in your life, um, just, keep your head on a swivel, stay woke, be bold, be keep yourself prepared for opportunities that may present themselves to you. Being aware is its own preparation, and awareness are more productive than I think most people give credit to, because it feels just internal. Like, oh, I'm aware, I'm up productive. But these things do something. If you keep yourself aware, stay interested, react accordingly to things, to threads or paths that you think might helpfully rearrange the role of job in your life. And be kind to yourself. That's extremely difficult. And we've all been there, where sometimes we just don't want to be kind. But I would ask you to try, and accept help where help is offered. Um, Absolutely. So, we've gotten to the end of the talk sheet on job. That's all I got. So thank you for your time, and take it easy. Until the next one.